For most of history, pirates have been told as tales of men. Men who drank too much, fought too fiercely, and died too loudly. But hidden in the foam of those stories, beneath the treasure maps, the cutlasses, and the shouting, are other names. Names spoken in courtrooms and prison cells. Names whispered in scandal and disbelief. Names of women who chose the sea. And when they were caught, history didn't always know what to do with them. Women in a man's war. Throughout the golden age of piracy, from the 1650s to the 1730s, the high seas were brutal, lawless, and strangely democratic. Ships were often run by vote, captains ruled by charisma, not title, and anyone, man or woman, willing to fight and plunder, could rise. But women? Women weren't supposed to be there at all. Most navies banned them outright. Superstitions painted them as bad luck, and yet they sailed. Anne Bonny, Mary Read, Fanny Campbell, Ching Shi, and many others, most lost to time. Some disguised themselves, some made no attempt. Some were wives, some were warriors, all were outlaws. When the game was over, the life of a pirate, male or female, was never long. But when capture came, a woman pirate's fate was rarely straightforward. A man might be hanged with little ceremony, but a woman, she was a problem. Courts didn't always know how to try her. Juries didn't know whether to pity or punish. Public opinion was divided between fascination and fear, because a woman with a sword in her hand challenged more than the law. She challenged the order of the world itself, and society doesn't like being challenged. Trial by gossip and gallows. Female pirates, when caught, were brought to trial just like their male counterparts, but the proceedings were different. Judges asked different questions, interrogated different motives, and made decisions based not just on the law, but on gendered expectation. Why would a woman choose piracy? Was she seduced? Was she insane? Was she forced? Rarely did the court believe she chose it freely. Sometimes they offered mercy. Sometimes they offered the rope. And sometimes they offered something far stranger, from breeches to petticoats. Once captured, women pirates were often stripped, not just of their weapons, but of their identities. Their clothes were taken, their names sometimes changed in records, their stories reshaped into something palatable for the public. No longer pirates, they were cast as victims, witches, fallen women, cautionary tales, because a woman who led men into battle, who took gold with her own hands, who laughed at danger and drank rum from the barrel, was too powerful to leave untamed even in memory. And so the rewriting began, long before the sentence was ever carried out. The calm, before the verdict. In this series, we will walk quietly behind those women, not as adventurers, but as prisoners, not at the helm, but in the dock. We'll explore the strange outcomes of their trials, the role of pregnancy in their sentencing, the rare instances of escape, the uses and abuses of pardon, and the way society tried to forget them, even as their stories refused to die. Because sometimes, the most chilling part of a pirate's story isn't the storm at sea. It's the stillness afterward, the waiting, the watching, the silence that comes when the sails come down and the gallows go up. The capture of Anne Bonny and Mary Read shocked the colonies, not because pirates had been taken, but because the pirates were women, dressed in men's clothing, armed and violent, feared and respected. When they were finally arrested aboard Calico Jack Rackham's ship, it wasn't a dramatic fight. There was no naval battle, no grand standoff. The ship was too drunk to resist. But Anne and Mary, according to witnesses, were the only two who fought back. They cursed the others. They fired muskets. They stood their ground. They were pirates not in disguise, but in defiance. The trial in Spanish Town. In Spanish Town, Jamaica, in late 1720, the trial of the female pirates began. The court was small, the crowd large. People came not for justice, but for spectacle. Two women, criminals, killers, corsairs, brought in chains. The courtroom fell silent as the charges were read. Piracy upon the high seas, assault, murder, theft. They were tried separately, but their fates were bound together. Witnesses confirmed they had dressed as men, fought like men, cursed like men. They had wielded pistols, led boarding parties, and laughed as ships burned. The jury was not amused. The judge was not uncertain. Guilty. It took no time at all. Both were sentenced to hang. Their execution was scheduled alongside the rest of Rackham's crew, but then something happened. But we are quick with child. In the flickering hours after sentencing, both Anne Bonny and Mary Read made a final, chilling declaration. We are quick with child. They were pregnant. And under English law, a pregnant woman could not be executed, not because of compassion, but because it was illegal to kill an unborn heir, regardless of who the mother was. And just like that, the gallows were postponed. A delay, not a rescue pregnancy, was not mercy. It was a pause. The women were placed in a separate part of the prison, still in chains, still under guard. Doctors were brought in to confirm the pregnancies. Records were updated. Executions stayed. The courts would wait. Wait for birth. Wait for confirmation. Wait for the moment when the sentence could continue. Anne Bonny and Mary Read were no longer pirates. They were wombs with a deadline. Mary Read's death. Mary Read would never hang. In April of 1721, she died in prison, likely from fever after childbirth, a cruel fate in a stone cell with no real medical care. There is no record of her child surviving. She was buried quietly, no gravestone, no fanfare, just a short note in the prison's burial register. Mary read, "Pirate, dead of fever." And that was the end of one of the fiercest women to sail the Atlantic. What happened to Anne Bonny? Here is where the story turns strange. Anne Bonny did not die. She gave birth in prison. But what happened next is unclear. Some say she was released. Some say her wealthy father in South Carolina pulled strings. Some claim she married, moved inland, and lived a quiet life under a false name. There is no execution record, no grave, no confirmed obituary. She simply vanished from the pages of history. A ghost with red hair and a flintlock, drifting through rumor. One trial, two fates. Anne and Mary's story became legend not because of their capture, but because of how human it made them. Pirates who fought, women who cursed, mothers who faced the noose. The court had wanted to make examples of them. Instead, they made myths, and those myths would shape how future generations understood female rebellion, not as an accident, but as a choice, a terrifying, courageous, and unforgettable choice. If Anne Bonny and Mary Read were storms that vanished in the night, then Ching Shi was a tsunami. She didn't just lead a ship, she commanded an entire navy. And when she was captured, or rather, when she surrendered, history didn't know how to punish her. Because unlike most pirates, she won, from brothel to battle fleet. Born in 1775, in Guangdong, China, Ching Shi began life not as a sailor, but as a prostitute, working in a floating brothel. Her life changed when she caught the attention of Zheng Yi, a notorious pirate commander. They married, and she joined his fleet, not as a wife on the sidelines, but as an equal. When he died suddenly in 1807, Ching Shi did the unthinkable. She took command. At her peak, she ruled over 70,000 pirates and hundreds of ships. Her power rivaled that of many coastal governors. Her reach extended across the entire South China Sea. She enforced strict codes of conduct, took taxes from merchants, and made even the Chinese Navy nervous. She was no hidden figure. She was a pirate queen, in full daylight. The war against a woman. By 1810, the Chinese government could no longer ignore her. She had defeated their ships, raided their coastal towns, even sunk foreign merchant vessels. They tried everything: military ambushes, bribes, betrayals, but Qing Shi outmaneuvered them all. And then, she did something no pirate had done before. She offered terms, not of surrender, but of negotiation. She walked into the governor's office unarmed, surrounded by her most trusted lieutenants. And she demanded a deal, a pardon like no other. The Chinese government, exhausted and embarrassed, agreed. Qing Shi and her fleet were granted amnesty. Not just forgiveness, but freedom. She kept her wealth. She kept her reputation. Many of her pirates were even absorbed into the military as official forces. She walked away a free woman, with more power than when she had started. It was the greatest exit in pirate history. Life after piracy. After retiring, Qing Shi settled into a comfortable life in Guangzhou. She opened a gambling house, raised a family, and lived into her 60s. No prison, no execution, no shame. She died wealthy, respected, and unpunished, an outcome unheard of among her male peers. While others were hanged or forgotten, Qing Shi was immortalized, not as a cautionary tale, but as a legend. Why didn't they hang her? It's a question historians still ask. Why didn't they try to kill her? Was it fear? Politics? A secret agreement? The truth is, Qing Shi couldn't be punished because she had already outplayed the system. She was not a reckless raider like the pirates of the Caribbean. She was an organizer, a strategist, a commander with infrastructure. She wasn't a threat. She was a rival state. And when the government had to choose between endless war or quiet peace, they gave her everything she asked for. The exception that proves the rule. Qing Shi's story is unique. She was neither hanged nor erased. She did not disguise herself. She didn't beg for mercy. She came to power, kept it, and left on her own terms. In a world that punished women for daring too much, she dared everything and left without a scar. But her story is the rarest of exceptions, because for most women caught in piracy, capture meant something else entirely: isolation, retrial, and in many cases, execution. In the stories of female pirates, one detail comes up more often than chance allows: pregnancy. It emerges not in their years of raiding or sailing, but precisely after their capture, in the courtroom, in the prison cell, at the gallows. A final defiance of the rope, issued in the softest, most biological of ways: I am quick with child. And suddenly, the law, so swift for men, halted. English law and the pleading the belly rule. By the early 18th century, English law had carved out a specific clause for women facing execution. If a woman could prove she was pregnant, her sentence would be delayed, sometimes for months, sometimes indefinitely. It was known formally as a plea for benefit of the womb, or more colloquially, pleading the belly. Why? Because the unborn child was considered innocent, and executing the mother would be tantamount to executing the child. This wasn't about mercy. It was about property and inheritance. Even pirates had heirs, and sometimes those heirs might matter. So the courts paused, inspected, waited. The process: cold, clinical, unforgiving. A woman making the claim would be examined by a group of matrons, usually older, married women, appointed by the court. Their job was to determine if the prisoner was truly pregnant or lying to avoid the gallows. They looked for physical signs. They asked invasive questions. They weren't always gentle or honest. If they believed her, the court recorded the result as found quick with child. This didn't mean she was free. It only meant she had time. Sometimes the sentence was carried out after birth. Other times, the delay stretched on until the records vanished or the prisoner died naturally. Manipulation or strategy? Was it real? Were all these women actually pregnant? Some, yes. Mary Reed's pregnancy was confirmed, though she died before giving birth. Others, hard to say. But the pattern is unmistakable. In a world where women had almost no legal weapons, pregnancy became a shield. It turned them from pirates into mothers, from criminals into protectors, from threats into temporary sacred vessels, and for some, like Anne Bonny, it may have been the very thing that saved her. A survival tactic passed through cells. Word of this legal loophole spread among women, from one prison to another, from dockside whispers to courtroom rumors. Plead the belly, they would say. Buy yourself some time. And so, pregnancy became one of the few defenses available in a trial that rarely went their way. No lawyer could argue their freedom. But a womb, a child, that could make a judge hesitate. What happened to the children? This is the most mysterious part. In most records, the fate of the children is left unmentioned. Some likely died. Some were taken to orphanages. Some perhaps lived obscure lives, never knowing their mother's full story. A few accounts mention children being born in prison, then quietly whisked away. No names, no details, no legacy, just a blank line where a future might have been. The most human of shields. In the end, pregnancy was never a guarantee of safety. It was a gamble, a delay tactic, a flickering candle held against a storm. But in the stories of captured female pirates, it shows something remarkable, that even when disarmed, imprisoned, and sentenced, these women still found a way to resist, to live another day, to force the world to see them as more than criminals, even if only for a moment. For every Anne Bonny, Mary Read, or Ching Shi, there are dozens, perhaps hundreds, of women pirates whose stories never made it into books, trials, or even whispered legends. Some we know only by first names, some by aliases they gave when captured. Many were simply labeled woman aboard ship or female prisoner. And after that, silence. A history, written by men and for men. Most of what we know about pirates comes from court transcripts, newspaper reports, naval records, colonial letters, all of which were written by men. Men who often saw female pirates as either scandalous distractions or unworthy of record. A woman dressed as a man, that was news. But a woman caught, jailed, and forgotten, not worth ink. And so, names disappeared, the ones we almost missed. Still, some names survived, barely. Fanny Campbell, an American woman who disguised herself as a man to rescue her fiancé from a pirate ship. Rachel Wall, a Massachusetts woman hanged in 1789, often called America's first female pirate. Charlotte de Berry, whose tale may be fiction or may have been stitched together from fragments of other lives. Jeanne de Clisson, a French noblewoman turned pirate in the 1300s, who allegedly painted her ship black and beheaded nobles for revenge. These are not household names. Even among pirate historians, they're fringe figures. But for everyone who left a trail of ink, there are 100 more who didn't. The problem of disguise. 1. Reason we know so few. Disguise. Many female pirates dressed as men, lived as men, died as men. Some were never discovered at all. Their gender remained hidden from captains, crew, and court. In such cases, their names weren't forgotten. They were never known to begin with. How many ships sailed with women aboard who no one ever suspected? We'll never know. The gaps in the records. Some trial documents refer vaguely to a woman captured, with no further detail. Others record executions but not crimes, or births but not mothers, or ship rosters, but omit any mention of passengers not holding rank. In many colonial records, pirates of lower rank, especially non-European or enslaved women, are only identified by initials or skin tone. One archive in Barbados lists a female Negro pirate, unnamed, executed in 1722. That's all it says. Nothing more, not even a letter. A story we will never finish. We often imagine history as a complete narrative. Beginning, middle, end. Heroes and villains, dates, facts, resolution. But history is wholes. And nowhere are the gaps wider than when it comes to women on the margins, especially women who dared to fight, sail, and steal in a world that told them to sit still. Their lives flicker briefly in documents, like stars behind a passing cloud. We see them, then lose them, remembering the unrecorded. This section is for them, for the unnamed girl who stood on a pirate deck as cannonballs shattered the air, for the woman who held a musket with shaking hands and did not drop it, for the prisoners who gave false names to the court and vanished into legend. They may not have gotten fair trials, or graves, or books, but here, in this quiet retelling of forgotten history, they get something else. A moment, a whisper, a name spoken softly, even if we'll never know what it was. Every pirate dies, some with a roar, some with a whimper, some with their feet dangling from the gallows, but death is not the end of their story. What remains, after the weapons rust, the ships sink, and the bones are buried, is memory. And memory is not always kind. It forgets, it twists, it rewrites, especially when the pirate was a woman. History or folklore. When a male pirate died, he was often turned into a villain or a folk hero. Blackbeard, Bartholomew Roberts, Captain Kidd. Men remembered in song, in tales, in museum plaques. But female pirates, they were remembered differently, often erased or softened, transformed into cautionary tales, reduced to love interests, disguises, or symbols of sin. Anne Bonny became a tragic romantic. Mary Red, a warrior led astray. Ching Shih, though legendary, is often stripped of the political genius she wielded. The truth was too dangerous, because it showed women as capable, cunning, and ruthless, not only equal to men, but sometimes better. And that made history nervous. Retelling the tales, again and again. Over the centuries, artists, novelists, and filmmakers tried to fill in the blanks. Sometimes they added sword fights that never happened. Other times, they invented love affairs, betrayals, and secret children. In 19th-century penny novels, female pirates were often reimagined as repentant saints, or worse, as devilish temptresses who had to be punished. It wasn't really about them. It was about the culture writing them. And in that culture, women who broke the rules weren't just rebels. They were threats to order. So they were rewritten, or they were forgotten. What we still don't know even today, much of what we know about female pirates is speculative. Letters are missing. Trial records were destroyed. Biographies were never written. And those that exist, often full of contradiction. Did Anne Bonny really survive? Did Mary Read die in childbirth? Was Charlotte de Berry real? Sometimes the facts are just Gone, washed away by tide and time. Why their stories still matter. So why tell these stories now? Why whisper about women who swung swords 300 years ago? Because in telling them, we reclaim more than just forgotten history. We reclaim courage that wasn't recorded, intelligence that wasn't praised, defiance that wasn't forgiven. We give voice to women who refuse to stay in their place, not just on land, but on ships, in battle, in legend. A legacy written in water. What happened to female pirates after capture? Some were hanged, some vanished, some bargained with pregnancy or sailed into history with a government pardon. But all of them, every last one, left a mark that refuses to fade. Not because they won, not because they survived, but because they dared. And centuries later, their courage still hums beneath the surface, in court documents, in ballads, and now, quietly, in your sleep.